Hey, everybody. Welcome to This Week in Pre-IPO Stocks podcast. With me, I got Clint Sorensen, Chief Investment Officer of WellShield, an outsourced CIO and investment research company. I got Nick Fusco, CEO of 8View. It's a pre-IPO secondary market pricing company. And Evan Cohen, co-founder and Chief Operating Officer of WithVincent.com. It's a media company focused on alternative investments. All right. So, fellas, this week wanted to talk about emerging technology. There's some interesting stuff happening right now in tech that I think is probably going to define what the world might look like here in the next 10 to 20 years. First and foremost, would you guys have a humanoid robot in your house? Right? Nick, humanoid robot doing dishes in your house. Are you pulling the trigger and buying one of those things, man?
Yes.
What do you think?
Yes. Short and sweet. Let's do it.
I love it, man. I love it. So Musk came out this week and said that the Tesla's got the Optimus Robot. Okay, that thing's coming. It runs off of like Tesla AI. He threw out some numbers. They're going to do 100 million robots a year. Let that sink in. And that's a 10% market share. So Musk is projecting 1 billion robots are made every year. Right.
Let's noodle on that before we go through all the other facts.
Yeah, rip it. What do you say?
I think that's an insane number, right?
That's robots making robots, right?
Yeah,
come on.
No, but I mean, where's the demand? You got to have the right price point, assuming he'll price it in accurately. But there are only something like 1.5 billion iPhones in operation right now. You got 6 million Teslas in operation right now. Where does that even make sense that you're going to have 100 million of these things printed over the next 10 years every year?
I mean, he's saying
Evan,
just to be clear, he's saying 1 billion robots a year, right? A year.
He was gonna crank out 100 mil on just his 10% market share.
Yeah, I mean that's so like you're talking.
Well, okay, so let's take iPhones and Android, smush them together. There aren't that many dishes, Aaron.
No, you're not wrong. Listen, you're talking about 8 billion humans and 8 billion robots. I mean, that's like the kind of stuff you're talking about here, right? And maybe at one point there's more humanoid robots than there are humans. I mean, this is quite a different view of what the world is going to look like.
So you know what I mean? We're comparing it not to iPhones and Teslas. We're comparing it to guns because there are more guns than humans, right? Or more cars than humans. I don't know.
I mean, you're
number
talking
just
about
super far fetched, you know.
Oh, it's wild. I mean, but I mean, Evan, what do you think? I mean, 1 billion robots a year. You're like our hardware guy here.
I mean, it's an incredibly outlandish number, and it's said by a person who has a great track record of saying outlandish things in order to hype up companies that he's working on or initiatives he's working on. And never, I'm not here to poo-poo, his viewpoint and or his ambition here. But at the end of the day, that's an obscene amount of robots. Now we should define, what we're calling a robot. And if we're really talking about humanoid robots, that's where it's really aggressive. I mean, that would just be. Yeah, it would be an unrealistic manufacturing proposition, let alone a maintenance proposition that we could actually even manage that amount of robots. And the challenge with hardware is at the end of the day, it just like, Moore's law, it evolves and improves so rapidly that you wouldn't want to build that amount of robot in a year or even 5 years because the cycling of the technology just becoming out of date and suffering of bit rot is just, it's way too high. You just have massive amounts of trash, and it's just really.
I'm gonna tell you, Evan. I got several science fiction movies I want you to watch. Right.
I mean, I recently watched Terminator over the weekend, and
really?
Just like, yeah. So
that's it, man.
Robots building robots is definitely a very scary proposition.
So how about this? How about we rein it in? Like let's rein it in. Like 1 billion robots is a lot of robots. Right. Especially every year. Right. But even if you're talking 50 million robots a year. I mean, we live in the United States. Luckily, we're a very wealthy country. Right. I have to imagine those robots are going to start showing up on the streets of New York. You know what I mean? I'm walking down the street and a robot comes walking past me doing whatever they're doing, going to the grocery store or something. Right. This is it could potentially become a part of our lives, having these humanoid robots around, right? it's interesting. When this guy Elon Musk says he's going to do stuff, like I actually think he's going to do it. Now, to Evan's point, like, are we going to have a billion of them? Probably not, right? But it does offer a really interesting perspective of like this is happening, and naturally, there's probably going to be. Come on, Elon Musk is doing it. There's going to be several billions of dollars of capital that will go towards right, Clint. I mean, what do you think? Like, if this guy wants to do something like this, and that's his vision of the world, there's going to be capital there for him to help make it happen, right?
Yeah, and I think we're getting too hung up on the outlandish claim and forecast by a very skilled salesman, among other things, right? So I think ultimately that's what this is all about at this stage. It's a huge capitally intensive undertaking, and he needs to start raising money now, and a lot of it. And so when he comes out saying he's going to build the global demand or supply in this instance, which he's assuming there's demand, the global supply is going to be $1 billion a year in robots. He's trying to get significant amounts of dollars, and that's why he said he was going to be worth $25 trillion if he made a certain amount of profit. So
Right.
Yeah, it's pretty wild, but it's a sales job to raise money.
Yeah, I agree with that. And he's probably, this is like his opening salvo, right? I'm sure to investors to be like, this is, let's start throwing some capital at this. But Nick, like, so I mean, Tesla's got the Optimus robot, right? But kind of bringing it back to pre-IPO land, I know there's Figure AI out there. That's a pre-IPO stock company that kind of comes to mind. And they're earlier stage too. So I don't even know if I'd call them pre-IPO stock per se, right? But and then of course there's a lot of AI, like OpenAI is, for example, is the brains or a part of the brains, I should say, within the Figure AI robot, right? So like perhaps there's some AI solutions out there, perhaps there's some like hardware solutions out there. Are there any other companies that kind of come to mind if someone wanted to play this kind of robotics opportunity, right? Humanoid robot opportunity that you can think off the top of your head?
Sure. I think you kind of named one of the most important parts, but you go right up the food chain. Well, Figure AI is invested in and partnering with OpenAI, which is partnered with or invested in by Microsoft, and now partnering with Apple. So the further up that food chain you go, you can start to see, a lot of these larger companies that are public or even very large pre-IPO stocks or companies rather are already in that space. So I think you want to look towards like a Cohere, a Hugging Face, an Anthropic, anything that could be useful for training your robot to do what you want it to do, which is clearly dishes or what have you. But I think we want to figure out where that defining line sits between is it going to be a robot that is commensurate to something in the Amazon warehouse, so you send it to Costco to do your shopping? Because I think actually some of that already exists, where a robot will go down the aisle and pick up all the SKUs and understand like where things are sitting, what needs to be restocked, even just at night hours. So I think anything that's useful in that training process, and maybe this is becoming our app layer, right? I mean that's the one we're all questioning of no one's really won it, and that's why they end up becoming SaaS companies in the end, which is that meme sent around. But yeah, I think everyone's part of that food chain. So just seeing if the technology could be applied to the humanoid aspect of it is interesting, and it sounds scary that almost feels natural coming out of my mouth now, because I don't doubt this will happen in the next 5 years. I just don't know to that scale.
To the scale, right? But can we all agree that it's way too early? Like, I don't know if I would be comfortable investing into a robotics company right now, right? Go ahead.
I mean, look at
he's doing it under
Boston Dynamics.
Tesla, though.
Yeah.
Correct. True. But even like a Figure AI, right, or one of these other maybe an AI company, I could see an AI company kind of pop its head up and be like, we're going to be like the AI intelligence inside of a humanoid robot. To me, I'd love to see it firm up a little bit, like, and it's kind of dovetails into the next point. Is like, and what we've been talking about for the last couple of weeks is like, how do you actually use AI? Like, what are the actual use cases for the humanoid robot? Like, what could it do? Right. So if somebody put a humanoid robot in front of me and said like, it could clean your house, it could do your dishes, it could take your kids to school, like, you know what I mean? Like, okay, like, yeah, I might pay a lot of money for that, if it's just something that's going to sit in the corner and it's like a, party trick with my friends when they come over. I don't know, like it's less interesting.
That reminds me of the Wall Street movie where they had the robot, or Michael Douglas had the robot in his house at the beach. So that was back in the 80s.
Man,
I don't think we want I don't think we want that. But think about what it could do from a productivity perspective as it relates to all these different services. Like, I wouldn't want to own a janitorial company, whether it's commercial or residential, because if you start to think through all the jobs that will replace, it's vast. If these humanoid robots, and they'll get very effective very quickly. And then you start thinking, plumbing, electrical, building things. Like, it's going to be heavily deflationary from a job perspective. So I can definitely see a lot being created. But to Nick's point, you got to have the data and you got to own the software that powers these things. I think that's the best way to play it. The hardware, Evan could forget more than we all know on hardware. I think he could tell you that those are not typically very good investments.
Yeah.
I 100% agree. I'm not even sure that playing the software layer, I don't even know where you would play it. To be honest with you, the concept of a humanoid robot doesn't make any sense. Like, if anything, you want purpose-built robots. Like, the concept of a janitorial humanoid robot makes no sense. Why don't you just have a humanoid robo vacuum, or just have a regular robo vacuum that just can do the floors or mop the floors or do whatever it needs to do? I mean, at the end of the day, a human only has two legs and 2 feet and 2 arms, right? Like, wouldn't you want the robot to have like 50 arms so it would clean substantially faster? So it doesn't really, like, I guess going back to the humanoid robot, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. But if you think about robotics on a much broader scale, I mean, we have consumer robotics at home. That's what the iRobot is when it's doing the robo vacuum at your home. I do believe that it makes a lot of sense to have and invest in robotic automation. I think the first industries you'll see it are going to be B2B industries, it's farming, manufacturing, et cetera. The idea of someone investing that kind of R&D and marketing dollars to acquire an end consumer to have a robot in their home doing their dishes just seems just like not a good use of capital. Probably not a good business. I think if you want to play it, you play it sort of to the picks and shovels, as Clint always says. Like, go for the GPUs, go for manufacturing, go for plastics and materials, because you're definitely going to need that sort of stuff for a robot. Logistics, all the things that require shipping a physical item there. I think the software layer in a lot of ways can get commoditized. And so I'm not even sure if there's a real great play there at the moment, rather than focusing on just the manufacturing level and where the margins will be made.
Your comparison to iRobot, the vacuum cleaner, is exactly where my head goes. And it doesn't have to be a humanoid with 2 legs, 2 arms. It could be more like, let's say, an iRobot that has a couple arms or something to pick up toys. But imagine if you've got your iRobot to clean your floor and it does the vacuuming. But then you could, hit a button or pay Tesla for the extension, and now it picks up toys. Cool.
Right.
Okay, now it's a little bit taller. It could take the dishes from the kitchen table to the sink, recycle any food scraps to go to compost eventually, pop everything else in the dishwasher. So think about the different layers that, like, Elon Musk would take this. I mean, I think they're charging for heated seats now on a subscription basis, in the Tesla. So you can just add layer after layer. That's where my head goes. It doesn't go directly to the Boston Dynamics of let's make it as human as possible.
So it's like negotiating. I negotiate with my kids on what their chores would, they get paid for each chore. So I kind of do the same thing now with Elon Musk, right? Like, okay, you want to clean off the table, I'll pay you $1 a day to do that, right?
There you go. That's your subscription. Yeah,
man. I got to tell you. So it sounds like we're bullish on robotics, right? And both from a hardware and software perspective, but the application, I think, is key. And I agree with you, Evan, too. I think, like, probably business to business is kind of a natural starting point. And there's probably like a couple decades there before we get to like really useful consumer robots that, anybody could use, right?
Mundane tasks,
and maintain.
Mundane tasks.
Yeah. Fair enough. Okay, so we'll see. Maybe my youngest kid, who's 6, might see a humanoid robot walk down the street in New York, but that doesn't sound like after this conversation that's going to happen. So, okay, let's turn to AI real quick. So AI's been out for like a year now, year and a half, ballpark, right? How are you guys? Give me one use case on how you're using AI, right? And I'll go first because I'm kind of putting you guys on the spot here a little bit, right? So I'll give you a sec. So I have fallen in love with the file upload for ChatGPT. I like love this thing, right? So I'm like taking pictures. I'll do something in Excel and I'll take a picture of it and I'll say, you know, put this data or I'll give you an example. I went into PitchBook the other day and I took, they have like this thing. I wanted one line of data out of there and I wanted to put it in Excel. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to hand type this in. It's going to take me like a half hour to get all this. I took 5 screenshots. I uploaded it into OpenAI, and I said, ChatGPT, I said, put this in an Excel spreadsheet. 30 seconds later, it's an Excel spreadsheet. It was awesome, right? I was sending an email out to clients. I created a table, right, in Excel. I took a screenshot of it. I popped it into ChatGPT. I said, write the HTML code that I could put into MailChimp, right? So that to create this table, crank the code right out. It would have taken me 45 minutes to do that. It's like my new favorite thing to do. It's like uploading stuff to ChatGPT and then having it like give me data back, right? It's awesome. It's like a huge productivity hack for me, right? But how are you guys using, like, is there any like special use case or something interesting that you're doing where it like really makes a difference, right? Who's up? Who's ready?
I got one.
I'll go.
I mean, I'm saving.
Go ahead.
I mean, I use it all the time. It's my research analyst. So I said, you are my research analyst now. And now that it's got a memory, I think that's really, really important, where it'll essentially go back into its memory and regurgitate an answer that's kind of a buildup of everything I've told it before. I love that. So like, for instance, one of the things we do for our economic regime is we use conference board data. We use leading indicators and coincident indicators, and we do a regime. So essentially, we'll have an acceleration regime, a slowing regime, and a contraction regime. And we had it define those regimes. It kind of verify our regimes, help us define them. And now it plots them anytime that I upload new data. It just automatically builds the plot for me in Python. It takes 30 seconds. That used to take hours of work a week or a month when we got the new data. And now it just spits it all out, gives me an immediate readout. So I've kind of trained it. My daughter's building apps on there. She built some app that when people are like on ChatGPT, essentially it said, hey, I want you to say these quotes when someone says they're feeling bad. So if you say, hey, I'm not feeling really good today, it'll come back with a motivational quote that tries to cheer you up. So like cool. It's awesome, man. I use it all the time. My family uses it. We love it.
All right, cool. That's a cool use case. I like that. I might call you and ask you some pointers on that. But Evan, you had something. Go ahead, man. What do you got?
Mean, I'm saving thousands of dollars a month on legal expenses at this point. I mean, a lot of yeah. I mean, I'm having to do a lot of contract review, a lot of agreement review. Hey, rewriting policies. Like I just rewrote our entire code of ethics and RI compliance manual with it. Basically, and what I was able to do is I was able to take a number of other investment advisors' compliance manuals and merge them all together and say, what are the best practices from these? Which ones are just like egregious? Which ones fit our protocols, our processes? And what's great is it can actually write out a full document for me, which I can just share with anyone who's looking to review it. And it knows our company, it knows our address, it knows the name of the entities, all the things that we have, and it's creating like effectively a full document for me, which would have cost $10,000 to $20,000 to have legal to do this for me or to have outside counsel. I'm able to ask it questions about certain things that I'm maybe not familiar with, maybe rules or regulations like Reg EE or whatever, where I'm like, oh, I don't know exactly how this fits to our business, and it'll just respond. I'm primarily using Claude, to be clear. Like that seems to be much more tailored to my use case than I find ChatGPT. But yeah, I find the output. Right. Yeah, Anthropic. Yep. I find the outputs to be arguably like nobody has even noticed. Let's put it that way. The partners that we work with, no one has said anything like, "Oh, this looks like it was like created by AI." They think we hired. They think we hired like 50. They think we've spent like $50,000 on consultants to draft our agreements. It's like, no, I just agree with it. AI and just have to write it, which is great.
Okay, but just so Evan, though, on that point, because something you said there was really interesting. So you took other people's like compliance manuals, like in that instance, right? And you maybe took like 3 or 4 and you uploaded them into ChatGPT, and then you said like, here's ours, like make suggestions on. Is that what did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, effectively, I took a couple and then I uploaded ours and I say, where does ours match? Where are our differences? Where do you think that we are light? Where are we over-indexed? Write these policies out, then write them in plain English so I can distribute them to my team so they don't have to read the super legalese, but give me an official version that I can post on our website, our privacy policy.
Oh, that's cool.
So that like I can be like, take this giant 47-page document and put it in like line by line, article by article, write it in one sentence that's in simple plain English, and I can pass it to someone and be like, here are our rules. Like now you don't have any questions.
That's cool. Yeah, that's like $5,000, $10,000 at least from a law firm, like a big law firm, at least.
Totally. Yeah. So I found
that's
that
really
to be the
smart
best use case I've had so far. Compliance and regulatory and legal.
Very interesting. Okay, that's cool. Nick, that's cool. I might call you on that one too, Evan. Nick, what do you got, man? What do you got?
I'm going to flip what you guys said on its head a little bit. You're training it up so it can help you out. I'm actually having it train someone on our team a little bit better who is incredible at their level of detail. But right before an email goes by and I see it, I'm like, oh, no, you need to shorten that. So the task for us is we're loading in these War and Peace styled emails, and we're saying shorten it up, and it will then train my teammate to just abridge everything he has to say down into like a third or half as many words. So yeah, it's cool. It's training my team here.
That's cool.
No one wants a 4-page email. It's not helpful.
Right. I got you. I haven't quite started to use it yet for summary, although I will say, I use Google, right? Workspace, right? For day-to-day stuff and emails on there. So I went on there to see if I could turn on Gemini for everything. Cause they had the developers conference, what was that, 2 weeks ago for Google. And they were showing all the stuff that you could do with Gmail. Some of it was like what you said, right, Nick? Like they could summarize emails and it was all kind of like built into Gmail. It's like $30 a month. So you can get it, but they're charging you for it, right? Which kind of like we were talking about some of this stuff like a couple of weeks ago about like how do you monetize this and like the last mile and whether some of these big platforms really have a leg up in being able to actually drive revenue. There's like a real world example, and I was like, but to this point, like I was like, I don't know if I really want to like spend $30 a month on this. You know what I mean? You know what it was for me? They had Google Meet, right? Is the web, like the Zoom for Google, right? It's called Google Meet. They're about to launch where they'll translate that, right? And all the meetings that you do. So like almost every conference call that I do with a client is on Google Meet, whether it's audio or video. So now I would have all of that saved and I could reference it and go back. And I know there's other companies that do that, but I'm waiting for Google to be able to launch that. And then I could, use that and the Gmail and probably stuff in Google Drive and everything else that I use it for, right? So
you strike me as an early adopter on most things. So if you had that, that's worth $30. As of yesterday, not worth $30.
Yeah, like you know what it is, Nick? I just want I use my cell phone for phone calls for every phone call I make, right? And also text. And then I use that thing for meetings. So like when Apple finally turns it on and everything, like every communication I have happens through the email app or, there's something about that where I don't have to take like notes anymore. I can literally just search and it will come back and say, oh, you talked to Joe Smith in June of 2020. I mean, it's not going to be able to do that because it's not, but 3 years from now, it can go back and be like, oh yeah, hey, you might want to fill out, hey, Apple Intelligence, give me 15 people that I can call today that might be interested in this product.
Right.
And then we'll like search through all my communication and come back and say like, here's 15 names, right? That's cool.
I think the sales is the one thing that, I mean, is just so dynamic and is very, very hard to replace. We've had that Air.ai, I think it was the company.
Yeah.
But just imagine a CRM empowered with all that intel, like using HubSpot, Salesforce. Hey, when's the last time I talked to John? And this topic came up. yeah, it'll be able to go through all your transcripts. Be amazing.
Yeah, I think the recording of video calls.
I'm looking forward to that. So yeah, go ahead, Evan.
I would say the notes for a video call, I've seen that used by some of the partners that we work with, the vendors we work with, and it seems like I'm always like, oh, that's such a great idea. We had just had this hour-long phone call. What's the takeaway? What's the to-do list? Like someone else, instead of taking notes where I'm sitting here with my pen and paper or asking, hey, like what were our deliverables? What are we supposed to respond to tomorrow? It's like the notes are already in there. You can digest the call. Like, oh, by the way, here's what you have to do. Here's what you're expecting. Here's the deadlines. And if it gets thrown into my calendar, like, I think that for $30 a month, that's probably a good value, but it probably would mean that you don't want to pay for ChatGPT. Like you got one day, you just want to pay for one or the other. Are you really going to pay for all of them? Especially if there's like one source here, one source there.
Right.
I haven't done the Google one yet, but it seems quite interesting.
Yeah, I mean that to me. Yeah, someone's gonna like pull this all together. It's just gonna be interesting to see if it's just gonna like I think Evan, you were saying this a couple weeks ago. It's just gonna end up being like Google and Apple, and it's the usual suspects on this stuff because they already have all of our stuff, and we're either using like Nick. You talk about everyone's using the iPhone. Like you already have the iPhone, so they already have all this. So like just pull the trigger on the iPhone, the Apple solution, right? Apple AI solution. Like why would you go and get some third party and then try to integrate that in and just use the Apple one, right? It's easy. Yeah, and same with Google. You know what I mean? I could see that. I could see that being the same. So
when you guys work with these chat experiences, what's your level of wariness to the answers quality and correctness?
Okay, so I found that. So I also use it for a lot of research that I do, similar to Clint. I found that if you put too many queries into one string, it starts to confuse the data. So like I'll be researching one company and then I'll flip to another company and then I'll flip to a third company. And then all of a sudden it will start giving me revenue numbers like all jumbled up between the three. Right. And so that's like a little concerning. Right. Because accuracy of data, especially when you're doing financial analysis, is obviously important. Right. So what I've kind of learned or what I kind of defaulted to is if I'm doing research on a company, I basically start a new string and I'm like, okay, we're researching this company, right? So I'll put in the same prompts and then we start a new company and I start to rip through. And that seems to be the quality, Evan, seems to be much better that way.
Yeah.
I think. Right.
Yeah. And for us, we are the source of truth. So we're not using it for research purposes. This is fact. Now just rephrase it. One fun thing is if instead of we want to abridge it, maybe it's talk like a pirate day and you could put it in a certain tone and make it actually change the way it writes. I could do this email again as though you're rewriting Clockwork Orange. So that's very cool. But no, in that sense, Evan, we are still the source of truth. So any data involved, any facts, figures, revenue numbers, pricing, it's all from us. So we're pretty cautious about it because I think there are definitely hallucinations, right? And you want to be concerned about that. But the protocols that Aaron just described are real and make a lot of sense for sure.
Yeah. Is your data set programmatically connected to ChatGPT? Like you have an API into it?
No, we are not.
Okay, so how does it look up data?
Oh, I was just giving back to my original example of abridging emails, right? So
Got it,
okay. when we put it context within an email and the email is far too long, we can still abridge it, but it will focus typically on key facts, numbers, bullet points, and do its best to maintain the integrity of those while like just shortening the number of words you throw into a sentence.
That it does very well. And I use that a lot. Like if I'm doing like when I do weekly research and I publish kind of the market update, I'll take, 4 or 5 different sources of content, right? And pop that into ChatGPT and it summarizes that into like one paragraph, which I mean, that would take me at least 10, 15 minutes to read all of those, kind of formulate some thoughts, summarize it in an articulate way into a paragraph. And at least with ChatGPT, I get, you get a one paragraph in 30 seconds, 15 seconds, right? And then I can kind of iterate from there. So, yeah, I find it pretty interesting. But I am leery, Evan, about just copying and pasting without gut checking, right? The other thing I found too is like you give it something to read. And again, I use ChatGPT. So you'll give it something to read and you'll kind of prompt it on like what you want it to suss out of that, right? And give back to you in a summary or whatever it might be in an analysis. And sometimes it misses some like key points, right?
Yes.
Where like
Yeah,
you
it's not
read through and
perfect.
you're like, that is actually probably the second most important thing that should have been said. And it like didn't include it at all, but it wrote like a 1-page response back. So, that's the other piece that perhaps, you might want to take pause. So it's a good way to start. I think as usual, it's a good way to start, right? I don't know if it's like lock, stock, and barrel. Take whatever it gives you and send it out. You know what I mean? But it's a good starting point. It's a good first draft, right?
So I'm just curious because all the use cases that we've all described are really primarily business or work related. Where are you using it in your non-work?
Oh my God.
I kind of
No.
I've started
Yes.
to do some Google searches. I've started to do some like more like search related stuff for it. I ran 6.5 miles on Sunday, and my index toe is now like this big. I went on there and asked it why my index toe is so swollen. Right after 6.5 mile run, it came back with like a doctor assessment, I suppose. Right, but I don't really use it a lot. But Nick, sounds like you do, right? Go ahead.
I love it.
What do you got?
Yeah, I mean, we were out walking around. We want to know what type of tree something is, right? Because we want that to bring home. Trying to make bubble solution, and you want to know like what the ideal ratio is. Cool stuff like that. But the photo angle is what I kind of like most. It's good. It's not
Like the
incredible,
multimodal stuff. Yeah.
yeah. And then also when you're digging through your photos, trying to find something, being able to click on someone's face, which has been around for a long time, or just typing in what you're after within your own photo archive. I like that a lot. I mean,
Yeah.
that saves so much time. Really, really good. And the fact that it also does text, because I take
Right.
probably 10 screenshots a day at a minimum. And when I'm searching for the content that I pulled off of Twitter or LinkedIn or whatever it might have been, I can search by a keyword that was within that, and then they all come up. So that gets a ton of use on my side. And that's
cool.
That's quasi work related, but the photos just in general are more for fun.
What about you, Evan? You use it personally at all?
Yeah, I think the ChatGPT app is like my favorite new iPhone app. That's what I use for my personal stuff, separating from work. But I use it for everything from planning a trip. Like we're trying to go away for the first week of July. We looked at a bunch of places. We're like, okay, well, maybe we're going to go to the Canary Islands. Like, give me a 6-day itinerary for the Canary Islands. What's the food like there? What's the place like there? Or like Ibiza or Mykonos. We were looking for something that was similar to Mykonos. So it was like, hey, like find us a place that's similar to Mykonos, but it's in Europe, but it's walkable. It has all these things that just provides. Like, oh, Mallorca. Oh, like Ibiza. Like, so just
cool.
giving me a lot of like research that I was going to have to do on my own. I also do a lot of the photo stuff. Like yesterday I took a photo of a lemon and I said, hey, this is kind of hard. I took a photo of it. Is this still good? And it like, yeah, like that lemon should be good. I don't see any like discoloration on it. Like if it smells a little funky, don't use it. But yeah, I'm just asking it little things like that. I find very valuable, and I use it probably like 4 or 5 times a day now just for like random things like that.
Well, I will say that. So, Evan, I know you don't have any young children, right? But Nick, the one that I'm using now as like my personal favorite party trick is I'll put ChatGPT on and I'll do the voice dialogue, and then I put my 6-year-old on, and I let my 6-year-old just talk with ChatGPT. I tell him, I prompt ChatGPT like, hey, I'm going to put you on with Duke. He's 6 years old, and I want you to have a conversation with him and talk with him. And he's like, sounds great. And then ChatGPT will talk to Duke like he's 6. So the thing that I've noticed is that ChatGPT never ends with just a statement. There's always a question. So he's constantly prompting my 6-year-old son, right? With, hey, we're like, oh, like you like dinosaurs? Which dinosaur do you like? And then Duke will say which dinosaur, or he'll like give him 3 or 4 options, and then he'll say one, right? It's like really super interesting, right?
That's a level up on Google Home, because ours is our 4-year-old is yelling like, play Wheels on the Bus, play the spooky version, like that sort of thing, and it doesn't work. As soon as you take it to the next level and say, can you play the spooky version, it doesn't work, right? He knows what he wants, but that's much nicer, especially if it asks a question in response. Yeah.
Yeah, man. Try them with ChatGPT and see how they do. It's pretty interesting. The one problem, and this is why I'm excited for this update where you can like interrupt the AI, because my son doesn't understand that you have to like wait until the thing's done, and then it's like, okay, now it's your turn to talk, and
Yeah,
you can
nor
like
do
come
we.
back at it, right? Yeah, like they're just ready to go to the next thing and they just rip it out. You know what I mean? So like that once that's happening and that like the back and
Right.
forth is released, I think it's going to be really great for little kids. You
That'd
know,
be sweet.
it's fun. I play for my in-laws, right, who are, you know, in their like 70s, right, and they can't believe it. They're like, this is crazy, right?
Have you
Crazy.
noticed that ChatGPT or none of the AI models ever have a negative viewpoint on something? Like it's always like a positive thing. And I was showing an example to my girlfriend yesterday because we were looking at his trips, and I was like, every time I'm saying, well, what would it be like to go? Is it nice to go to this country during July? And it was like, wow, that can be a great place to go. And I'm like, I wonder what it would say if is it nice to go to Chicago in February? And it was like, Chicago could be a lovely place to go in February. And I was like, see, this thing is wrong. This doesn't understand that there are there are rankings of better and worse, and it needs to understand that Chicago in February is not the same as Mykonos in July. It's just not.
Listen, it's the AI lives in the affirmative, man. He lives in the affirmative,
reinforcement.
right?
It's like you can do nothing wrong.
Nick and I were talking about that the other day, right? At dinner,
Yes.
right, Nick? Like living in the affirmative, saying yes. It's the AI. I don't know who's training that thing, but they believe in that stuff.
I mean,
right?
if you had ChatGPT always, or like 95% of the time was affirmative, and Anthropic was 50-50, a little hot and cold. Who do you want to talk to?
Yeah. Well, I know a lot of New Yorkers would probably just go with like, I want the negative one. I want the one that's sarcastic.
Tell me how it is.
Like, right?
Tell me how it is.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
I want opinion. I'm like looking for something specific. I'm like, hey, find me the best chicken parmesan in New York City, and it's like Olive Garden. I'm like, God, that's not what I'm looking for.
No, yeah,
no,
right.
That's
yeah,
Olive Garden paying through the
yeah,
nose.
Yeah, right. Come on. All right, listen. So, fellas, last one, real quick. Space mining. So space economy, right? I think everyone's very familiar with SpaceX, Blue Origin, right? There's a couple other like rocket companies. There's this like whole ecosystem of startups now. Like now that you can get stuff to space, there's this whole like ecosystem of companies that are starting like to do things in space now. One of them I've been talking kind of about space mining, and everybody like eyebrow raises at me when I talk about, say space mining. There's a company now, Astroforge, space mining, right? Alexis Ohanian, this guy, he's like venture capital firm, right? 776. He invested into this company, Astroforge, right? So it's like getting VC backing. And these guys, like, you go on their website and they have like, they're running missions, sending stuff up, doing telemetry, seeing which asteroids are good to mine. Like, this stuff is happening, man. Space mining asteroids, mining the moon is coming down the pipe. So any thoughts on just the space economy? I mean, you want to talk about emerging tech. This is it. Like 10 years ago, nobody was talking about doing stuff in space. Now there's this like whole thing out there, right? It's like an app store. It's like there were no apps before 2008. Now there's apps everywhere. You know what I mean? Like there's millions of apps. Like I think we're setting into like have a lot of space companies, space related companies, right? But any thoughts on that? Maybe Evan, we can start with you first. Like any thoughts on space economy related companies?
I think it's fascinating. I know a number of, I'm going to call them space entrepreneurs or space ecosystem entrepreneurs. I think a lot of it is very ambitious, kind of unclear what the long-term proposition is. So at the end of the day, there's a large amount of money available for it. There's a lot of innovation opportunity there. I've seen space manufacturing, I've seen space mining, I've seen space activity, I've seen space robotic building. I mean, there's just a lot of opportunity, and people want to explore that, and the government's willing to pay a lot, research is willing to pay a lot. The privatization of the space ecosystem is just here, it has arrived, and I think that now when it comes to like investing in it and whether those are great businesses, I think there's a lot of risk. I'm probably deploying my dollars into much of that stuff, but I do think that it's a very interesting business, and I appreciate that there's people trying to innovate beyond the scope of our world.
Yeah, the space race is
right. Nick, what do you think of space economy? Yeah,
the space race is back on, I would say. And to piggyback on what Evan was saying, I mean, you're probably not going to find out you were wrong for another 10 years. So maybe for the next 10 years, you've got a pretty damn good investment. And then you also have 10 years for them to pivot. So I know we make some movie references, right? Oftentimes on this podcast, because a lot of those things are coming to fruition. So whoever watched Terminator over the weekend, maybe this is the example of Armageddon, where we need to have an asteroid defense system. And then for whatever reason, this company could be leapfrogging some of the initiatives that NASA have done. And all of a sudden that becomes their pivot and becomes very important to plant a nuke on an asteroid to split it in two, or whatever it might be, as ridiculous or Hollywood as you want to make that sound. But I think you have such long time horizons, which I know I love as an investment, important to a good investment, really looking forward 10 or 20 or 30 years. But these guys have a lot of time to figure it out as well. So yeah, I'm not going to poo-poo this. I'm going to live in the positive, as we were saying with the AI models. Who knows if it's going to take, but you got to have some of these in the portfolio, I'd say.
For sure. This to me, I feel in 20 years, 25 years, right? Like right now in the S&P, 500, the top 50, 100 stocks in the S&P, there are no like space related companies. I guess you could say Lockheed Martin, whatever, right? They do some space related stuff, but no like space dedicated companies like a SpaceX, for example, right? I think in 20 or 30 years, we're going to have like space specific companies, like in the top 20, top 30 in the S&P, like really big companies that just could never have existed now, right? But there's going to be so much infrastructure. Who was telling me about space Nick, was that you telling me about space elevators? Somebody was telling me about a space elevator where they would have something so far in orbit where it literally it would be tethered to the Earth. So it would be outside of Earth's gravity and tethered to the Earth, and you could send stuff back and forth from the planet out into space via elevator. And I'm like, get out, stop. And they're like, no. And it would cost like $50 billion or something to make. I'm like, that, like, I actually think people would pay money to do that, right? Like, this is wild stuff that's happening and being discussed, right?
Absolutely. I think one of the things that I've spent a little bit of time thinking about, or I'm going to say fantasizing about, in relative to space, the space economy, is the fact that when you're out in space, the laws of physics and on the Earth don't necessarily apply, which gives us a whole different world in which we can play with. We can play with nuclear physics. We can play around with energy production. We can play around. There's a whole material sciences business, and maybe we find a mineral or a material out there that is superconductive that can yield a lot of benefits to the things that we have on Earth, where we're just restricted by the geography of Earth. And one thing, I spent like one of the theses I've had for the last 12 years of investing has been quantum computing. I've just been quite bullish on it for a long time. I've invested a lot of personal capital into it. I've spent a lot of time researching it. It feels like quantum computing is eventually the paradigm that we must reach in order for all of these, advancements in AI and computing to really become efficient. But the challenge with quantum computing is temperature. At the end of the day, in order to achieve that quantum state, it operates at a temperature that is it generally burns through a material. But if you can do quantum computing and then AI compute in a world where there is it's a vacuum environment, and you have sub-zero, if not frozen temperatures, and you could bring that data back to Earth, you can have very efficient compute outside of Earth with satellite connectivity. And that is quite interesting if you could figure out that play.
There's the elevator shaft, right? There you go.
I don't need you don't need it if you have satellite connectivity, right? But there's just a lot of interesting. So that's like where I'm like, that makes sense. Like I could invest in that. Moonshot it. Literally.
There's just a lot of stuff coming. Like this is why I always like coming back to emerging technology with you guys, right? Because the one thing I always talk about with my clients, these financial advisors, is I think my opinion is the S&P 500 is going to look totally different. Like the top 25, 50 stocks is going to look very, very different than it does today in like 15 to 20 years, right? And for people who are in their 40s and they're investing for retirement, that is like smacking the sweet spot of equity investing, right? 15 to 20 years. So like, it's like, I think it's important to be aware of these emerging technologies because I think it's gonna have a very big impact on not only just our personal lives and society, but the way we do business and also what the investment opportunities and landscape looks like. So, anyway, I know this might seem a little hokey to talk about space mining and humanoid robots and some of these other things, right? But I think it's real. Like this stuff is happening, right? So it's interesting to put it out there for folks to think about.
There are full venture firms focused on this vertical. Like it is not that nascent. It is growing. There's money. There's real money behind it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's one in New York, Space Ventures, I think, has an
Well, I would say this though, Evan. No, you're right. No, you're definitely right about that. I would just say for your like the middle part of the distribution curve for like financial advisors, right? I don't know how much time a lot of folks really think about some of these emerging technologies, right? Because these companies really they're not publicly traded, and some of this stuff is so new that it's, but then it hits like this AI thing with NVIDIA. So then it hits and boom, it's like a huge investment thing, like stocks are up 100%, 1,000%, right? It's crazy. So
crazy.
Yeah, it's interesting times we live in. All right, fellas, we'll end it there. I appreciate you guys. Thanks for doing this today.
Thank you.
Thanks.